you tell us about Kai Correa and Jeff Albert and Troy Snicker?
Yeah, so Jeff, obviously a very familiar face to our organization, has done a great job impacting our hitters at the development landscape, has a great deal of familiarity with a number of the players who are at the major league level, and was really a natural fit for us. He's very familiar with Troy as well, and Troy comes extremely well recommended, a guy we were very excited to be able to access, bring into the organization. And Kai comes to us as really one of the best defensive coaching minds in the game, someone who has established a reputation from people he's worked with, players he's coached repeatedly as innovative, who can really move teams and organizations forward on that side of the ball. And so we're ecstatic to be able to add all of those guys to our staff.
David, when you say best defensive minds, can you elaborate a little on what that means? We see whoever the infield coach is hitting ground balls to guys, working with guys in the afternoon. What makes Kai at that level where he's so desired that job? What does he do?
Yeah, so I think coaches can impact players in a number of different ways. At a base level, it's what drills are we asking players to do? How are we catering some of our instruction to individual player needs? How we're working with players on a daily basis? And then, yes, some of the in-game strategy elements that coaches are working on day in and day out with some members of our front office. And then it's the coach's job and responsibility to execute and make those real in-game decisions about some of our defensive strategies. And so Kai has distinguished himself in all those areas throughout his career, and we think he's really going to help our organization.
Do you have a pitching coach yet?
Not ready to comment on a pitching coach.
What's your commitment to bringing back Pete and Edwin Diaz?
Look, we love both Pete and Edwin. They've been great representatives of the organization. We'd love to have them both back. At this stage of the offseason, it's really tough to predict any outcomes, but certainly we'd love to have both those guys back.
From the outside, it seems you had a strategy last year on how you dealt with Pete, which was, is there going to be a market there and then you'll react to it maybe at the end? Why would anything change?
Well, look, I think we always have strategies as we go into off seasons with how we're going to progress. And some of that is reading how different segments of player markets evolve. And that is a fairly healthy strategy to pursue. And so we'll continue to read how different segments of the player markets evolve. We understand that both Pete and Edwin were integral parts of our team, and we're certainly interested in bringing them back.
Do you need to know with Pete early in the process, Dave, as far as how it might affect some other things you want to do between finding somebody else at first base or other moves?
Look, I think you'd always love clarity early in the process. Sometimes that's not realistic, and off seasons are really long, and it can be tough at times in November when we're all really excited to get going and standing here at the GM meetings, wherever the GM meetings happen to be that particular year. But a lot of signings occur in January, February, and March. And off seasons now go into spring training. And we have to recognize that, be patient, and let the off season play out.
How much does Pete's defense affect how you view his value?
I'm sorry?
How much does Pete's defense affect how you view his value?
Look, I think all parts of player contribution inform how we view the player. For a position player, that certainly is going to include offense and what they do in the box, and also what they do defensively. It also includes what they mean to us off the field, what they mean to us in the clubhouse, what they mean to us in the community. All of that gets factored in with every player, and Pete's no different.
Do you have enough internally to replace him if you don't retain him, or would you look to go outside for that?
I think we have internal options. We have younger players who could deserve some more opportunity. We have players we can move around positionally. And we would probably also explore what is available outside there, but I think all that's very premature. We'll see how the offseason progresses and go from there.
You talked quite a bit at your end of the year press conference. You used the term run prevention quite a bit. Can you get to that level of run prevention if Pete is your first baseman?
Okay, I think part of improving our defense in particular is having some of our players who were with us last year play better defense. That is going to be essential. I've talked to some of our players about this already. This is going to be an emphasis of ours throughout the offseason, into spring training, into the season. Sure, we would expect some new players on our team somewhere around the diamond. That's natural in an offseason. But we're going to need our current group of players to play better defense. The brand of baseball, the brand of defense that we played over the last 2 months of the season wasn't close to good enough. It has to get better.
David, will improvement in defense include having Juan Soto DH?
I'm sorry?
Will that include having Juan Soto DH?
I think Juan's one of our players who we believe can perform better defensively than he did last year. And I think he believes that. He's going to work hard on it this offseason. He's motivated to do that. He's proven that at previous times in his career that he can perform better in right field, and we believe he will.
Do you think Pete is one of those players who can improve?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Because there have been points in his career where he has, and he's also a very motivated, dedicated player.
David, what's just your level of appetite for allocating serious dollars to a reliever?
Sorry, appetite for
allocating serious dollars to a relief pitcher.
Allocating serious dollars to a relief pitcher. Look, I think we're always evaluating each situation on the individual situation. I try not to draw lines in the sand. Certainly, we understand the benefits and risks of investments in every segment of the player market. That's part of the work that we do. But we're never going to rule out any particular type of player or going after any particular type of player.
How far did talks with Edwin Diaz get before he decided to exercise his opt-out?
I'm not going to comment on any specific contract negotiations.
Do you have anybody internally that you think could be a closer if Edwin isn't here, or is that a position you think you have to fill outside?
I would imagine over the course of the offseason we're going to add to our bullpen. You never know exactly how the back end of your bullpen is going to take shape, but I would certainly imagine over the course of the offseason we're going to add to our bullpen. We have plenty of vacancies there, and I think we'll have the opportunity to improve that area.
Could you see Senga in that role? Because he's struggled. I mean, that might present its own challenges, but he's struggled
in a bullpen?
yeah, as a reliever.
I think right now we view Senga as part of our rotation. He's proven at the major league level that he can have really good years, and clearly the last 2 years at times have been struggles for him. But the talent is there. The desire is certainly there to have a bounce back year, and we're going to give him every opportunity to do that.
Your time long-term to Lindor and Soto, do you think it's wise for another position player already in their 30s, like Pete, to tie yourself where essentially almost half of your position would be tied to a period where they could probably begin a stronger climate?
I think length of contract, number of existing commitments, that's always going to be a conversation we have to have internally. And somewhere there is a tipping point there. I don't think we're necessarily there yet, but sure, somewhere there is a tipping point. I also recognize that you generally get good free agents when they're in their 30s, and to get good free agents, sometimes you have to extend them into places in their career where performance isn't always going to go up.
But, and I don't want to put philosophy in my words, but it felt like you love the idea, like the idea of flexibility, roster-wise, being able to maneuver. But at some point you begin to landlock yourself, don't you?
Yes, there is a tipping point there, and roster flexibility is important, and being able to evaluate your team on an annual basis to determine where the needs are, I think is very important. I don't think we're landlocked yet, but it's something we have to be aware of. We also have to be cognizant of we've got some really good young players coming, and we're very optimistic about what our team is going to look like going forward. We need to give young players a chance to play. And as we go through this offseason and likely future offseasons, part of the balance is going to be filling the team with players who we think make us better and keep us competing at a very high level, while also allowing space for our younger players to get to the major league level and have a legitimate shot to contribute here.
How do you view the third base situation right now, and was the rotation between those young players an effective way to go about that last season?
I think Brett had a really good year, took some real steps forward in his development. I think going into the offseason, he's probably someone we would pencil in for significant third base time next year. Probably premature in mid-November for me to outline exactly how playing time is going to be allocated, but Brett did a really nice job. He earned more and more opportunity as the year went on. I think he's going to continue to get that.
Were you happy with how it worked out to have those younger players sort of rotating in at third base? Do you feel like that was an effective situation for their development and for you guys, for the lineup or defense as well?
Yeah, I think Matt did a very good job of trying to find the right matchups for players, of trying to get players into the lineup when it was called for, trying to keep everyone fresh, also trying to keep everyone rested. So I was pleased with how it went.
What's your commitment to maybe finding a number one type starter? Is that something that is high on the agenda?
You'd always love to find a number one type starter. I don't know how many true number one starters are out there right now. I don't know how many are actually going to be traded. I don't know how many are truly available in free agency. But you'd always like to find that top of the rotation guy. Certainly makes building out the rest of the rotation, the rest of the pitching staff a lot easier. And so if one of those guys happens to be available, we'll be right there with them. I will also go back to what I've said many times, and the way to ultimately have a true ace on your staff is to develop the ace on your staff. And I think we're on our way to doing that. I think we will do that. And we're going to continue to try to supplement that in any way we can.
Dave, do you anticipate the payroll being in the same spot that it was this year?
I don't think we go into an offseason with any set payroll number. Clearly, Steve is very committed to supporting our baseball team in any way possible, and as opportunities arise, he and I are in regular contact as to what might make the most sense for the team.
Please teach me and Japanese player, Murakami and Okamoto, your opinion.
I'm not going to comment on any specific free agent at this point, but certainly understand that those players are available.
Does Steve say the opposite way in that, like, I'd like to actually lower this?
No.
How do you view the starting pitching staff right now?
I think we have numbers in the starting pitching staff. I remain very optimistic about the younger starters that we have, about the guys we have coming even behind the group that we saw get its feet wet at the major league level. We're also certainly not going to turn away from any opportunities that we think make ourselves better at the major league level. And so we'll be looking at starting pitching in both free agency and trades. Very early for me to predict how active or what discussions are actually going to take place, but we're certainly going to be involved in that market.
Do you have a number in mind on how many relievers you need to add on the outside?
I don't have a set number, and some of that's going to depend as to maybe the shape of what those relievers are, and whether part of it is the true lockdown guy at the back end, or whether part of it is distributing that over multiple relievers. Clearly, we need to add some and more than one. We do not have a distinct number as to how many relievers we think we need to add.
Go in spring training and do you think to start the season?
TBD. I think it is possible to start the season. It is more likely a little bit later in April.
Speaking of the Japanese players, so like you have the Senga, also Dodgers have success with Japanese players. So how about your attention to the Japanese player in a free agent market?
Sure. I'd say at a high level, every single year there are really good players coming over from Japan. We have to be very vigilant and involved in that market. We are, and I don't think this is a fleeting trend. I think this is going to persist and if anything, just grow in terms of the number of really talented players coming over from Japan.
Who's your center fielder right now?
Who's our center fielder?
Yeah.
I think we have a couple of options. I think Tyrone Taylor has proven he can play out there at a high level defensively. Carson Benj is going to come into spring training with a chance to make our team. And we'll see where the offseason takes us beyond that.
You said at the end of the year that this would be a time of personal assessment in terms of what you could do better. What has that assessment led to? What have you discovered about ways you want to change your philosophy or approach to the offseason?
Look, I think any time you go through the type of season, and certainly the ending of the season that we went through, it provides a great opportunity for reflection, evaluation, postmortems, all of that. And I do think we came out of that with some very distinct and notable lessons. I think we're going to keep those distinct and notable lessons internal, but I do think it's going to help us all be better going forward, and likely influence how we go through every stage of the player acquisition process, whether that's off-season, spring training, trade deadline.
David, how much does a bench's presence impact what you may or may not do externally at center field?
I think it's part of the larger conversation that I alluded to earlier. When you have good young players at the upper levels of the minor leagues, we have to find space for those players to play. Carson's among them. He's not the only one, but he's among them. And so as we build out our team, we have to ensure that as we go forward, there is room for our young players to get to the major leagues when they deserve to get there and have an opportunity to really contribute to our major league team.
Would you put Jet in same boat as far as maybe being in that mix for center field heading into spring training?
I think Jet in spring training, I wouldn't close the door on anything. I think we'll see where our roster stands. I wouldn't close the door on anything right now.
What did you think of Nimmo's year defensively?
Yeah, I think Brandon had a year where he made a lot of really good plays defensively, and then there were probably some plays that he knows he can make, that he wants to make, that we didn't quite secure. I think he would tell you that he's a better defender overall than what he showed last year, and I think he's going to prove that.
How's Alvarez health-wise?
He's doing well. His hand is getting better. He's going to, here as we get into December, progress into sort of the normal off-season routine and should be full go at spring training.
You talked a lot about development and sustainability. How much does that affect, I guess, your appetite for the trade market in terms of that's acquiring a frontline pitcher by leveraging your prospects?
Yeah, I think if a frontline pitcher, top of the rotation pitcher is available, we're going to be involved in those discussions. There are limits to what we would do, as there would be for any player, but we do have the depth and quality of farm system at this point that we can both have those players impact our major league team in a real way and potentially trade some of them to get some really near-term help if that's available.
How's your thinking with the rotation change, Dave, after what happened last year? I know you went for a lot of depth to try to get through the season. You had a lot of injuries, a lot of issues with that stuff. Do you think more of, I don't know if marquee is the right word, or the next level pitcher to fill out the rotation with, or fundamentally, do you look at kind of building rotation differently as far as the expense you put into it and that sort of thing?
I think we are always open and have always been open to adding the top line starter, the guy who can truly stabilize the staff. We recognize there's real value to that. I think we also have to evaluate how many of those pitchers are actually available on an annual basis. When those pitchers are available, we are going to be heavily involved in the pursuit of those pitchers.
How many do you think there are?
I don't know. We'll find out as we go through the offseason.
I mean, philosophically, you always have been. I mean, you're not alone in this, but wary of spending too much money on pitchers of a certain age, mileage, that sort of thing. I'm just wondering, based on what the Dodgers did this year, they had a lot of success with their guys. Many of them didn't pitch after the season, but succeeded in the playoffs. Does that change when you see what the market has to be for those guys now, $30, $40 million a year for those pitchers?
So I think it's the combination of what is the market for those pitchers, who is the particular pitcher, the individual pitcher, and then obviously what are the years for the individual pitcher. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to cast a one-size-fits-all rule. I think we are always open and have always been open to pursuing players for very lengthy contracts at high AAVs who we think have the ability to really impact us and help us, and we're going to continue to do that.
You had a spate of pitching injuries this year. I mean, have you guys reassessed in terms of recovery? What possibly led to this happening this particular season?
So it's interesting. If you look at our injuries in our organizations, even at the major league level, we certainly are not outliers relative to the league. This was an industry. This is an industry-wide phenomenon. I have a lot of confidence in our medical staff. I think we have a very good medical staff. I think what happened to us is we had a string of injuries to pitchers who were all pitching very well, and then the replacements for when those guys got hurt, frankly, didn't pitch very well, and it really exacerbated the injury issues we had. But I don't think we have an issue with our training protocols or our workload protocols or anything like that.
What's next for Jet?
What's next for Jet?
Yeah.
Look, Jet's going to come to spring training, and as I said earlier, I'm not going to rule anything out in terms of where he's going to start. I think there's probably some growth there, some room for development, but here in November, I'm certainly not going to close any doors.
Do you still see him as a guy with a lot of versatility, or would you like to maybe move him to a position where he can get more playing time?
Well, I think he is a guy who can play at a high level at all three positions up the middle, and that's extremely valuable. Where his ultimate home is going to be at the major league level is going to be partly determined by what our need is at a particular moment, and partly by sort of where his performance excels. And right now, we think he's performing really equally well at all three, which is a great place to be.
Is Vientos' role kind of contingent upon what happens with some other pieces there, like Pete and other stuff?
Yeah, I think Mark had a disappointing year last year. I think he's very motivated to prove that last year was the outlier, and he's much closer to the player that we saw in 24. And the one thing that's apparent is, regardless of how our roster shapes out, there is going to be opportunity. Like there through performance or injuries, there is always opportunity. There are always plate appearances. There's always playing time for players who are performing. And so what we're encouraging Mark to do is put himself in a spot where he comes to spring training ready to perform, regardless of what our offseason looks like.